Beginning in 2012, the Illinois State Archaeological Survey began investigations to assess potential impacts on archaeological sites resulting from improvements for the Chicago to St. Louis high-speed rail program. The project area follows the current Union Pacific Railroad from Union Station in Chicago southwest to the Mississippi River at East St. Louis, a distance of 244 miles. Constructed in segments between about 1850 and 1864, the current Union Pacific line has had various names over the years, but for much of its existence was known as the Chicago and Alton Railroad. By 1879, this line extended as far west as Kansas City, Missouri. Archaeological and archival data demonstrate long-term utilization of the corridor, indicating that much of it follows earlier prehistoric and historic trails and roads. The section between East St. Louis and Lincoln in Logan County closely follows the route of the early 19th century Edwards Trace, which in turn follows an earlier Indian road. Between Bloomington and Chicago, the corridor follows the Old Chicago Trail, established in 1833 to transport agricultural goods from the frontier to eastern markets. Near Chicago, this trail joined Archer's Trail, another old Indian trail now known as Archer Avenue. This trail was the northern precursor of the Pontiac Trail, the first 20th century road between Chicago and St. Louis. Built in 1915, it followed the general route of the high-speed rail corridor and was later replaced by routes 4 and 66 and Interstate 55. During its long tenure, the corridor witnessed the eras of wood, coal, diesel, and electric-fueled engines. Wood was the preferred fuel for the first 40 years of the railroad era due to its abundance, cheapness, and ease of harvest, although it could be difficult to secure on the Illinois prairies. The transition from wood to coal began in earnest between about 1860 and 1870, and by 1880, over 90% of all railroad fuel in the U.S. was coal. Around 1930, diesel and electric engines became more abundant and eventually replaced the coal-burning engines. Notable engines on the line were the wood-burning locomotives carrying President Lincoln's body to Springfield Memorial, and the Abraham Lincoln, the first streamlined diesel-electric train between Chicago and St. Louis, an early predecessor of contemporary high-speed engines. Since high-speed trains are designed to attain speeds of about 110 miles per hour, it's crucial the rails can safely handle such speeds. When the corridor was originally constructed in the mid-19th century, the average speed of the train was about 25 miles per hour. And by about 1890, the fastest trains averaged about 40 to 45 miles per hour. Though the existing railroad corridor has been updated over time, it was not constructed for speeds over 100 miles per hour. Planned improvements to the existing corridor include improved grade crossings, construction of additional sidings to clear the main line for high-speed traffic, bridge and culvert improvements, signal and gate improvements, and safety improvements to existing stations. The ultimate goal of these improvements is to upgrade existing inner-city passenger corridors to improve the reliability, speed, and frequency of existing rail service. Our initial investigations involved a record search to determine if any known archaeological sites might be impacted by the high-speed rail project. To do this, the Illinois Inventory of Archaeological and Paleontological Sites was examined to identify such sites in the project corridor. In general, the investigated area varies according to rural and urban settings. In rural settings, this area extends 250 feet either side of the existing railroad center line, and 125 feet either side of the center line in urban areas. The record search indicated 68 known prehistoric and historic sites within the project corridor. These sites were particularly abundant at the south end of the corridor near East St. Louis. Of particular interest was the archaeological evidence relating to railroad construction along the original corridor. Background research revealed records of Irish railroad worker campsites in McLean and Macoupin counties, as well as cemeteries with burials of Irish railroad workers who were victims of the 1851 cholera epidemic that swept through the state. To date, field survey has resulted in the identification of 30 new sites dating to various historic and prehistoric periods. Among the more interesting sites, field crews have re-identified the Gouger site in Will County, which has produced remains of prehistoric Indian occupations and Potawatomi and Euro-American remains from the early historic period. Also identified in Will County is a well-preserved abandoned bridge of rough-hewn stone over Hickory Creek dating to the mid-19th century. In summary, archaeological investigations are revealing a long period of human utilization of the investigated corridor, spanning the prehistoric through Euro-American periods, demonstrating its importance throughout the long period of human occupation in Illinois. Thank you.